Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Podcasts.com.
The White House scrambling to deal with the surge of migrants at the southern border in Del Rio, Texas.
It's unclear how many migrants have been released in recent days, many believed to be from Haiti. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says if migrants can't be expelled under pandemic policy,
they're either transported to an ICE facility or released with a legal document. That legal document includes fingerprints, photos, phone numbers, an address in the United States, and a background check.
Psaki says President Biden is horrified by images of Border Patrol on horseback with reins that look like whips, reportedly mistreating Haitians, and that an investigation will be conducted. At the White House, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
In the Senate, negotiations on a police reform bill have ended without an agreement. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott says Democrats would not compromise on liability protection for police officers. He calls it deeply disappointing. Troubling projections Wednesday about the Colorado River. The government says a shortage of water on the river because of persistent drought conditions means Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico will get less water next year. An icon of black cinema has died.
Actor and director Melvin Van Peebles, who directed films like Watermelon Man and was the father of actor Mario Van Peebles, has died at the age of 89. The Criterion Collection and Janus Films tweeted the news with a statement alongside the icon's family. The statement read, "In an unparalleled career distinguished by relentless innovation, boundless curiosity, and spiritual empathy, Melvin Van Peebles made an indelible mark on the international cultural landscape through his films, novels, plays, and music." Van Peebles' first feature, The Story of a Three-Day Pass in '67, launched him in Hollywood. That was followed by Watermelon Man, about a bigoted white man who wakes up one day to find he's turned black. Michelle Polino, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
You know all those amazing photos and videos saved on your camera roll capturing your love for Guam? We want to see it. Log on to visitguam.com/Instagram to submit your best moments for a chance to win weekly prizes. The Guam Visitors Bureau will choose a weekly winner, so share your love for our island paradise now and win. Brought to you by GVB. Thank you for making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
Well, not quite. Let me get this mask off. Because I am not Bob Klitzkie. I am Daryl Taggarty. And I'm sitting in here for Bob Klitzkie, who has gone to places beyond our shores and will be back on the 1st of November. But to remind you, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. Welcome to Tall Tales for Thursday, September 23rd, 2021. I'm Daryl Taggerty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie. Thank you very much, Jose. And I'm here, actually. I was tuned in yesterday to hear Bob because I thought I was supposed to start today. And so I'm here today, but I was not close enough yesterday to run in here and keep you company and see what was going on. Do you know what happened yesterday that would have been such a great thing to talk about? Well, neither do I, because I don't know what has happened since the last time I was in here. It's like there isn't anything going on, Jose.
Nothing at all.
Oh. So what, we had to whip up a
talk
storm? And then the storm's not even blowing right now. Just drove in from Jigo, and every plant is standing still. The sun's not out, but the clouds are very high. And so I'm just not quite sure what's going on. As we get some updated information on the progress of Tropical Depression 20W. Is that 20W?
20W. Doesn't even have a real name yet.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. As we get further information, we'll go ahead and bring it to you. In the meantime, let's go ahead and... I should also mention that today is a special day for me in the radio business because, as some of you may know, I have a radio show elsewhere on Guam airwaves. And today is the 32nd anniversary of me being host of that show. Yeah. September 23rd, 1989, I took over from Shelby Shapiro, who had been on for 12 years on a show that he founded. And I'm still doing that. It doesn't conflict with this, so I can do both. You won't hear me say any more about it. I'm just really happy about being here with you today.
Well, congratulations, Daryl. That's a long time for being on the air.
One
place.
I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time just sort of wrapping my head around it because I haven't even been married that long. I've been alive longer than that, but, what else have I done that's been as long as that continuously? I don't even ride my bike as often as I used to. But be that as it may, let's go ahead and let you know that our telephone number here is 888-8255, and I'd be very happy to receive your call. If there's something that your hair is on that has caused your hair to catch on fire, please call us and let us know what we can do to help you deal with it. Going through the rules of engagement left by our venerable host and founder of Tall Tales, we thrive on disagreement, but we're not being disagreeable. So give me a call. Also, if I appear to you for those of you watching on Facebook, if I appear to you to be somewhat sick, I will, perhaps, during the course of the show, answer my phone and find out what my test results were. But I actually am suffering from allergies. Now, that means that I would not be welcome in a store or a restaurant sneezing and, blowing my nose and all that good stuff. But don't be alarmed because you won't catch it. I'm here in this sealed box. There's 2 panes of glass between me and Jose. And
we've padlocked him in.
Well, that's fine as long as I got a cup. So we'll proceed on that. But first, with Zami Ikatni. Here I am looking through here, and we've got 2 days of Zami Ikatni to bring to you because I wasn't here yesterday, and I'm surprised. I'm impressed. Let's start with yesterday's PDN. Cover It. Perhaps the most substantive of everything that's on the Zami Ikatni lineup for today. I got 4 items. So, Uncover It. AdLoop should pay for executive security costs. Very interesting. Was it Senator Moylan who brought this up? I believe that was what Bob was talking about the other day. Yeah, Freedom of Information Act filed by Senator James Moylan and introduced Bill 202, which would authorize the chief of police to make a budget plan for executive security each year. And so the spokeswoman for the governor said that Senator Moylan used numbers without context to support his bill. And the PDN's bottom line is, after recounting the information, $425,000 for overtime, $2 million spent as of September 15th for fiscal 2021, $292,147 in overtime. After recounting the facts, the PDN concludes the bottom line is the Guam Police Department shouldn't have to pay for executive security using its budget. If Adelup judges that the governor and lieutenant governor need protection, it should be assuming the burden of that protection. The office of the governor should pay for any executive security costs. It can do so either by covering the tab now paid by GPD from the governor's budget, or it can hire a private security company to provide protection. Very interesting. Is it up to the legislature? I'm just thinking about this. Who's going to pay for it anyway? Who's going to pay for executive security? And, of course, you always pay prospectively. You don't wait until something happens and then have security. Perhaps we could all relax and say that we are a very peaceful community, and no one would ever think of accosting the governor or governor's staff or the lieutenant governor, either out in the public or in their offices. That there's no reason to have executive security. Simply let the governor drive herself around, and she doesn't need to have people hanging out at the official residence or anything like that. Simply because we are so peaceful here. And nobody has any kinds of controversies that they would take so personally as to attack a public official. And then proceed on that basis, that it's unnecessary. We're too peaceful here. But basically, if we're going to have executive security, the costs are still going to come out of the same bucket of money. It doesn't matter. Tomato, tomato. Because executive security costs are either going to be within the GPD budget or within the executive direction. Would you think she's going to hire $2 million worth of security at the expense of her own staff? Cut down the numbers of people at Adelup?
Sounds good to me.
Well, ideally, the directors of the agency should be able to coordinate their own affairs, and the chief of staff and the governor bring them in to coordinate from agency to agency when they need to have their heads knocked. But if any of you who have worked up at Adelup for any of the governors realizes that there's a lot going on that has to be brought to the governor's particular attention, because the way that the government works, there are certain things that need to be routed to the governor for the governor's attention, whether it's correspondence with federal government, correspondence with interests who don't find their satisfaction at the agency level, of suggestions for bills to be vetted at the governor's office level, communications. Particular affairs such as education, where the governor doesn't directly administer education, but there's education policy out of the numbers of entities that fall under the heading of education. I already mentioned the clearinghouse. So it's not realistic to expect the governor to replace her staff with police and security. Or perhaps Senator Moylan would like to have the governor surround herself with personal or political bodyguards, not public employees, not trained people, but more political staff who could throw a block and watch around corners and hang out, because that certainly is available if he's willing to give her the budget for $1 million, whatever. Oh, this may be it. Jose, can you give me a countdown, and while I cut my mic here? And we're back. That was actually the call from Public Health telling me that my COVID test was negative. And I needed to know because of all these symptoms I've been having over the last 10 days or so, having to do with allergies. And none of them really, only a few of them overlap with what COVID has. But it's been very strange over the last 10 days. And more extreme than ever before in my life as far as allergies. But besides that, we're talking about Senator Moylan's suggestion that the governor's budget is excessive and should be absorbed within her own executive direction budget. Perhaps Senator Moylan would like to have the governor contract mercenaries like Blackwater or somebody to provide that kind of security. Maybe she could have her own. No, but you see, I mean, let's not have GPD do it. Let's not have the most, if you've ever met them, the most discreet, the most highly trained, the most dedicated to be able to just sit there and not go stir crazy. And they're very, very skilled at what they do. And they are very senior operational staff within GPD. These are not raw recruits. They're not 98-pound weaklings. They are Rambos, all of them. And perhaps that's a bit overkill, but what would you rather have there? The lowest bidder? You know, let's turn it over to GSA and find a company that would be willing to do it for like next to nothing, just to have people all around the governor and inside the chambers and inside the official residence 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And let's see what happens. You know, who would buy that position? You know, what company would like to buy that position? Or maybe donate it to her? You know, we could have you know, I mean, there could be
This applies to everything, right?
You could do this. Oh, let's have the governor give herself extend a contract for her personal security, $1 million contract, and save $1 million. You see, we both win, right? I mean, that's the alternative to what is going on now. Or you could say, no, the governor's not under any kind of threat. She just hangs out by herself. You see her just driving herself down the road. And see what happens. See what happens. I mean, let's go ahead on faith that this community will, everyone will keep their heads on straight and not take their grievances directly to the chief executive on the street. Let's see. So, you know, the amount is outrageous, but really that has to do with overtime policy and not hiring enough and retaining enough skilled officers. And these are the highest paid already on the payroll. They aren't going anywhere. Do you want them out doing traffic? Is that where you want them? And so I just don't see where this is all going. Yes, it's a valid argument that the budget is too high. But that's not what he's asking. Privatize it. Ooh, that's an idea. Let's privatize it. Let's go for the lowest bidder, and we'll have, go ahead, let your imagination run wild. Actually, that's what I wanted to get to, because that's what the PDN is saying. Or it can hire a private security company to provide protection. Okay. $15 an hour, just like somebody's going to be walking around down at Epau Beach at 2 in the morning to make sure there's nobody, sleeping in the bushes. And so that's kind of where we're going. So I think this is on the, it's almost borderline silly. It's not serious.
I think it depends on who's in office, because we had the same debacle with Calvo and the First Lady bringing a detail to, what was it, England?
Now that is
I know. So
strange.
It was awful.
No, it is.
It was unnecessary.
See,
and
that's
and
right. But you
expensive.
see, that's right. And so the discussion really is, how do you use it?
Exactly.
Not
Yeah.
how much is being paid.
Yeah.
How much is
so?
it's
Yeah.
and also the budget is a purview of the legislature, and the legislature can look at it and be reasonable. But who's not facing this? Okay, Senator Moylan brings it up, fine. The rest of the senators, are they just going to sit back and go, well, that's Senator Moylan's issue, so let's just kind of leave it there on the table. We'll deal with it another, 2 or 3 years. Okay, do we have folks who want to talk? Let me see. I'm looking at this. I'm looking at the screen. I don't see any useful information.
Click on the F on the taskbar.
F on the can you tell I'm new here? F on the taskbar. F. I see 80 degrees F. Okay, you're going to have to give me a better clue than that, Jose. And here he comes to unseal the room. That's okay. This is live radio, folks. It looks like a B. That.
Sensor flash.
There we go. I've got Martin and repeat up. And so as soon as Jose gets back into his saddle, we will go on and take a look. Let me see, what time is it here? Okay, good. Let's go on with Martin EZ. Good afternoon, Martin, and welcome to being my first caller on this edition of Tall Tales.
Good afternoon, Daryl. This is
there you are.
Martinez. Can you hear me?
Oh, Martinez. Got it.
Okay.
Hey.
2 days ago, something disturbed me. I'm a loyal listener of Tall Tales, and Bob knows that.
Is this
I
Paps?
brought up an issue, and then at the end I said, it'd be good to pray for Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munoz Barnes. It's sad that I know that, she's has an immediate family member, and she's had been by his bedside. That doesn't mean the person may be really sick, but it means the person's really in the hospital for over 10 days now and seeing a specialist. And then we all know she got into a car accident.
Yeah.
And the news reported that, she was bleeding from the head. Head injury is always bad. And she was overnight in the hospital and still in the hospital, the last report. And I said, it's good to say a prayer for her. Frenchie, as you know, a loyal caller, he goes up and makes fun of it. He says, well, there's driving and get into an accident because you're on the cell phone, or there's driving and getting into an accident. I don't know, he gave another reason besides the cell phone. And then he said, well, there's driving and getting into an accident because you're eating too much, trying to make fun that she's put on weight. Frenchie should grow up. Here's somebody whose immediate family member is very sick. She's been in a serious car accident with head injury, and he makes a joke about her getting into an accident because maybe she's eating too much. Frenchie, just grow up. And I think I heard there's about 30 other French people here. I think you're making them feel bad. So grow up, Frenchie. That's all I got to say.
Well, thank you very much, Paps, for the call, and I didn't hear that.
About somebody talking that way. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't hear it myself, but there are some things that kind of rub our fur the wrong way. And of course, that's
those of
okay.
us who do Tina Moona Barnes knows that she's a very thick skin, and I think whatever is said about her in that manner, although it is kind of crude, just rolls off of her. I don't think it affects her.
Yes, but it speaks to the way that we talk to and about each other.
Oh,
and that's where I think Pops is coming from.
Yeah.
Because there's some things some places we don't go. You know, these may be public officials, but
true.
They don't need to be.
Neither me or you are Frenchie, so that should address it to him.
That's right, and that's what Martinez just did. Just addressed it to him. Anyway, we've got Repeat on the line. Let's go to Repeat. Hey there, Repeat.
Hey, how's it going, Mr. Taggarty? How have you been?
Actually doing well, except for these allergies. But I'm really happy I'm back here in the saddle and surprised it fits so well.
Yeah, negative is positive sometimes, right?
Yes, yeah, especially when you get the jumper cables crossed. You know?
Right.
Then there's all kinds of sparks.
Right. Well, I was talking about you got your results. That's good that it's negative.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank goodness for that. But anyways, I wanted to chime in on what you were talking about Moylan's bill. You know, I just wanted to comment on how nonsensical it is. Because he's a sitting senator, and what happens when GPD comes up for their budget, they have a hearing. And all he has to do is say, hey, can you give me a breakdown of what you guys are planning to spend on executive security? You know, you don't need a law to make it happen. You know, you're a sitting senator. During the budget hearings, you can just demand it, not even request it, but demand it.
Yes.
People demand breakdowns all the time for the agencies, right?
Yes.
What are you going to spend on gas? What are you going to spend on utilities? What are you going to spend on that? And then it's just a bunch of hot air because, you know, it doesn't make any sense. If he wants the executive to pay for it, fine. But that doesn't give GPD any more money because it all comes from the general fund. And if the executive now has to pay for it, then GPD can't say, okay, we're budgeting for executive security. Then the senators are going to say, no, you can't budget for executive security because the executive is going to pay for it. The administration's paying for it. So we can't give you that $2 million. We have to take that away from you and give it to the administration. So, you know, it's taking it from the left hand and giving it to the right hand. It's a bunch of hot air for nothing. And my whole thing about it is there's actual real stuff that needs to be done. There's real work that needs to be done. And he's here, you know, pussyfooting with this thing, and it's not really productive.
Well, it's really too bad because he's made some very strong promises when he ran. His billboards created a pact between those of us who vote and him offering his services to the public as a senator. And when he does things like this, you know, weeks after the budget has gone into effect for the next year, and these were not brought up in hearings, he goes through a FOIA instead of through the process that is available to him when he was elected. Then we have to stop and think, how do we connect the dots? How does this make sense? And it makes sense as an issue, as a political issue, as profile.
Right.
But it doesn't make sense as work.
Correct. And you know, a lot of people, when I criticize, you know, I'm doing it objectively. You know, I'm just asking, okay, what is this really doing for us? Is this helping us? Is it making things better? It really isn't. But when I do criticize him, a bunch of people will get on and say, well, I like it because he argues with the executive. He pushes back, or he holds them accountable. Really? I mean, it's good to argue and it's good to hold people accountable, but make it an issue that's important. Make it an issue that makes sense. Make it a problem. It's like he's creating a problem that is not a problem, and then he's proposing a solution that is nonsensical.
And that's one of the reasons.
The way I see it.
And that's one of the reasons why I really had to lead off Zami Ikatni with the PDN column in its editorial column, because they took that bait and they ran with it. And they went in just a really silly direction, not thought through at all.
Yeah, and the officers, they have specialized training. They have situational training, scenario-based training that is for executive security.
Yes.
They're a specialized unit. You can't, like you said, you can't just throw, some newbie in there, and you can't really contract this out. This is something that has to be done by GPD.
It has to be professional and it has to be public.
Yeah. It's the police power of the state, right?
Yes.
You can't just pawn it off to, some fly-by-night company that's, not going to be held accountable when something goes wrong.
Well, I really appreciate you calling in this afternoon, Repeat, and feel free to do so again. If you hear me being silly, let me know, okay?
All right.
I mean, if I'm being silly, not on purpose, right? But, being silly. Thank you very much, Repeat. Yeah. Okay, let's go to our first break of my new job here, and we'll come right back with more Tall Tales.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
There's so much that's new with the Eat Fresh, Refresh at Subway restaurants that we can't possibly fit it all into one radio spot, but I'm gonna try. There are amazing new toppings like hickory smoked bacon, bacon and smashed avocado. Try your favorite sub on the new breads like the hearty multigrain wheat or the artisan Italian white bread. Not to mention Subway's thicker, juicier steak. That's all I have time for. You gotta refresh to be fresh. Only at Subway.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, welcome back. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie this afternoon, and we'll get a count of what the score is so far between the Post and the... I was going to write it down on Tuesday, and I was moving around. Anyway.
60-something, I think, for the PDN. That's all I remember.
He did say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he didn't...
Triple digits for the Post.
As they earned one at a time. So it's a true score. Okay, let's take a look at the Post from yesterday. The article was, the editorial was, dozens of recent deaths could be an eye-opener on vaccination debate. Headline writers really, really get to me. But that's okay. Let's see. I'm not going to read it. It's a half a page. But it just gets to me. Dozens of recent deaths could be an eye-opener on vaccination debate? Or not. It depends on the depth of people's feelings about shots and risk. It's down to personal choice. Public policy versus personal choice. It's kind of why we've gotten to this point in the campaign to promote vaccination. You can have an opinion about whether, the vaccination debate, and mandates. But does it matter? Because is it enforceable? We haven't even gotten there yet. Many of you who know me would consider me a leftist, a Democrat, but I'm going to break with the supposed dream of leftist elitists. The dream to wield power over all aspects of life, like taking sides on abortion policy versus constitutional rights to personal choice, no matter how tragic. It's not going to open any eyes. It is being decided by individuals, and they will make those decisions based on the same weights that they were using before. Some people do respond to pressure. Others simply needed more time. Maybe something in the news they're going to hear is going to change it. But the recent deaths are not really an eye-opener. It may change the perception of risk, which is exactly what they were counting on before. So the whole article weighs the stories that had already run in the last couple of days. It just cranks them back out again. And the bottom line, the Delta variant, unfortunately, is extra dangerous for people, she said, quoting public health. Well, Dr. Ann Pobutsky, the territorial epidemiologist. But it's a story. It's not an editorial. It's an interview. And we'll get to this in a moment. There's another one. Let's go back over here to the PDN today. The editorial today is Be Good Neighbors, Secure Objects Outdoors, Skip Hiking, and Stay Safe. Okay. Again, I'm not going to read it to you because we've got 4 of them today, and I would rather get on to some other things. But they talk about this tropical depression that's passing over us now. Is actually supposed to pass by us at its closest point of approach around 5 or 6 o'clock this evening, from the 1 o'clock information that I had. And it's a story. It's a story, but it doesn't quote public safety officials. It just regurgitates public service announcements. It's lame. PDN. Oh, this is the Post. Sorry, this is the Post.
That's 2 in a row.
But it's lame.
Yep.
And strange. The power of the press is being used to replace the nanny state. They're taking their voice, their editorial voice, and telling people what it is that public officials say. The ones from civil defense and the first responders say, watch out for flooded roads, pick up the stuff around the yard. We don't need to have debris flying around when we get gusty winds. That's their job. It's not the newspaper's editorial job to say these things. They're just wasting space. And they want to be General Mom. And they don't have to be General Mom. They're the free press. And they don't have to be critical. But if it was taking a look at the way that the public officials roll out their notices and use their editorial power to kind of spruce it up and make sure that people understand this is the typhoon season, and some people may not have gone through these before, fine. But they're wasting space here. And it just bothers me. So that's the Post today. Today in the PDN, the headline, the title is Assurance. Security needs to be part of park and ride facility plans. So they're talking about the Guam Regional Transit Authority building a park and ride facility in Dededo. Now, I'm not, even in preparation for the show, I've been reading the newspapers a lot less. I've gone through the papers and I don't see information that's giving me a lot of, it's not telling me very much about what's going on. It's so superficial. If I see something I want to dig into deeper, then I'll go skip around and see what I can find out about it. I'll listen to Bob Klitzkie, and listen to his analysis. But so they talk about, okay, part of a $9.5 million federal grant. Most of it's going to be used to purchase buses, but he wants 150 parking stalls at a site across from American Grocery in Dedido. And talking about running a line from there to Mangilao for students at UOG and GCC coming from the Jigo Dedido area. Okay, fine. This is okay. This is good. But leave your car in one spot. But then they proceed to extol the virtues of park and ride, which is pretty common in places that have mass transit. But they conclude that what's needed is major consideration that needs to be planned for and implemented is security. People are unlikely to use the facility if they are worried that their cars might be vandalized or items in the vehicles stolen. Potential users who will be away for hours and even most of the day will need assurances their vehicles and belongings are safe during that time. There should be no easy way for outsiders to access the park and ride facility. The lot needs to be securely fenced in and regularly monitored, preferably with both guards and cameras. That will be a deterrent measure and can be used in any prosecution of cases. It doesn't seem to show any effort to ask mass transit whether security was budgeted for. They could have picked up the phone and said, can we ask you whether you're going to have security? No, they come off sounding like they are just another planner in the government of Guam in a meeting at mass transit going, oh yeah, we need to budget for this.
Your expectations are way too high.
No, but I mean, we're talking about the press.
You're right.
And I know, because I've been watching this for years and years and years, I know that it's entirely possible that this has not occurred to mass transit, that they did not budget for a fence, that they did not budget for cameras, because that would be an operational budget, and there's very little maintenance and operational budget considerations when they try to spend federal money on facilities. It's just drop as much money into the facility as possible and leave it at that. So $6 million for buses and $3.5 million for a parking lot. Wow, that sounds like mass transit. All they had to really do is repeal part of the bill, part of the law that gave mass transit control over parking on meter parking on public grounds. And then they'd already have parking. They'd have parking all over the place, everywhere, island-wide. And maybe they need a mass transit police. And we have a new mass transit police, and they would be the ones to go around and make sure that these cameras are maintained. These are the questions that the media needs to be asking, not making suggestions about something that's going to be built in a year and a half or 2 years. It drives me nuts. As Repeat was saying about the effort of Senator Moylan, it's like a contagious disease. The media is catching the superficiality of politicians and trying to one-up them on being being crafty and being slick and being relevant, instead of going back to their original mission and building on their particular institutional strengths and design. So I am not awarding any stars out of 4 editorials today. I can't commend any of them. It's
denied.
Thank you. It is just, I expect more from the media. I mean, really. You know, and then here's another one. Yes, it's a valid opinion. But why suggest private contract guards and cameras and not police cameras? Why not authorize the police to install cameras at the park and ride? And let the police, Coban, and the precinct over there in Dedido have a monitor and cameras and you know, because the best way to penetrate someplace like a park and ride is simply to go in and park and have somebody walk out. But actually, you just, one or two people stay in the car. And then they get out of the car when nobody's looking, and they just go from car to car. And when time comes, people are looking for them, they jump back in the car. And nobody can see them because they're covered up or something. You know, take out the back seat. It's so, you know, criminals, they're going to find ways. And for security purposes, you got to be smarter. But the editorial's not seeming to be smart at all. Jose, do we have a break coming up before 5? Okay, so let's go ahead and do that break right now. Again, our telephone number is 888-8255. You can chime in any which way you'd like. I invite your calls as we get started on this time together on a Thursday afternoon, waiting for a storm.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
I can't dance. I can't dance sitting in this swivel chair, but I will appreciate the music. Thank you very much, Jose. Again, our telephone number here is 888-8255. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie. And Bob has a feature in his show called The Card. And I am going to start building the card. However, I don't have a card ready. I don't have the card ready. Bob Klitzkie, bless his heart, has been steeped like a tea bag in adversarial relations. Of course, his personal relations and his professional relations are direct and cordial, but he is a master of looking at adversarial relations, and so he can see very easily where issues and the proponents of issues are pitted against each other. And he dissects them expertly, which is what's so great about Bob Klitzkie being on the radio here at The Point.
Was he ever in debate club? Has he ever talked about that? Because that's a good skill for debate club, knowing both sides.
But he didn't start with that. He started as a teacher, and then he went into law. And he went into administration. He started as a Marine, but I don't think he did debate in high school. But he started as a Marine. And that's not necessarily adversarial, but he built on his skills, his values, his skills, his experience. And that's what makes him so wonderful as a show host. He brings all of that experience in and applies it to the items on the card. But for me, I'm not wired that way. I look for convergence of interests. And I look at missions. And how do you fulfill a mission? How do you fulfill a purpose in life? Do you have a purpose in life? But especially when you're talking about people in the public sphere, in public office, they have a defined mission. They have a defined job. They have a defined term. They are limited by the Constitution, by laws, not to go beyond their powers. And there's the legislature that has the power to change those rules on our behalf in response to what we want. And are they doing that? You see, and that's where I look. And so it was difficult before, when I've done this show, to build the card. But I did bring in something for you today. It's not the card, although I do have the card. I'm not qualified to talk about some of these issues. I don't know them as well enough to discuss them like Bob Klitzkie does. I have his list, and I'll go through and see how far he got. I want to remind you of something that was a notable quote from our current governor's inaugural address. And this is a direct quote. "The era of exploding operational debt, massive budget shortfalls, higher taxes, closed doors, and decreased performance is over. Now is the time for change. We must make the die-hard choices." Now, am I saying this? Am I reminding you of this as a supporter of the governor? Or am I simply reminding you of your role as a citizen and a voter in the upcoming election? We don't know what the choices are. But this is part of what our governor stated would be a foundational approach to the way that she does her job. And so I wanted to remind you of that because I kept that over from the time I was doing the show before. And I think except for this past August, I think August 11th or so, I came in for one day. But there was I hadn't been with you for about a year and a half. But here I am now, so what do I have for you? A topic for consideration of sex, the Eastman memo, and a quotation about society. So, society, this is Jonathan Zittrain, writing in the Atlantic in July of this year, as a comment within his article, "The Internet is Rotting." Quote, "Society can't understand itself if it can't be honest with itself. And it can't be honest with itself if it can only live in the present moment. It's long overdue to affirm and enact the policies and technologies that will let us see where we've been, including and especially where we've erred, so we might have a coherent sense of where we are and where we want to go. Applying critical thought to ourselves using our own values." He's not prescribing the values to you. He's not prescribing what direction you should go. Simply to look honestly at where you are, or where we are, if you're talking about the public sphere, where we've been, and what have we done wrong, so we can have a coherent sense of where we are and where we want to go. How can you make anything better if you don't know whether what you're doing is wrong or if you're on the wrong track? And the only way you would know right and wrong is by reference to your values. And those values don't change, and they shouldn't be suspended. We go through a great deal of trouble to maintain our values. And there's much discussion these days in the media assuming common values, but you don't hear them expressed very often. And that's where code comes in, and these shorthand words, these sometimes negatively termed dog whistle terms, but also terms that, as shorthand, immediately signal to the listener where they should, the speaker's sympathies on an issue, but not talking about the values themselves underlying, simply that you should line up behind me because it's us versus them. And this is something that you'll hear me return to time and time again here on Tall Tales, so that we can be clearer about what it is that we are talking about. And we may even get into the discussions that Jose and I have offline about various issues where he and I may really, really disagree. But as we discuss with each other our respective viewpoints, we find out that we're really much, much closer to each other, that we agree on 85 or 90% of it. And it's only on that 10% that we disagree. And we need to take that, we've taken the time. Now let's go to the news. Let's find out what's going on in the world. We'll come back and give you an update on Tropical Depression 20W here on Tall Tales.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The FDA okays some booster shots. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News, giving approval yesterday for a third dose of the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine for people 65 and older or those with additional health risks. The Centers for Disease Control will resume its debate today whether to recommend boosters. The additional shots would only be for people who'd gotten the Pfizer vaccine so far. President Biden announcing yesterday the U.S. will buy millions more doses of the Pfizer vaccine
to be donated to low and lower income nations around the world, saying America will become the arsenal of vaccines.
This is another 500 million doses that will all be shipped by this time next year. And it brings our total commitment of donated vaccines to over 1.1 billion.
Speaking at a virtual summit on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly, the president said he'd like to see a second UN COVID summit in early 2022.
Fox's Rachel Sutherland. The White House still taking sharp criticism over the migrants that have massed at the Texas border.
Of all of the president's screw-ups, there's not a single one greater than the crisis at the border. And it is a crisis.
Louisiana Republican Senator John Kennedy, despite assurances from the Secretary of Homeland Security that the migrants would not be allowed into the U.S.
DHS now confirms they are releasing some Haitian migrants into the U.S., saying in part, quote, individuals who are not immediately repatriated are either placed in alternatives to detention, detained in an ICE facility, or released with a legal document, either a notice to appear in court or a notice to report to an ICE office for further immigration processing.
Fox's Bill Maloosh on the border and the withdrawal from Afghanistan impacting the president's approval rating. The latest Gallup poll says it's 43%. That's a monthly drop of 6 points. America is listening to Fox News.
Contact Express Financial for all your financial needs. Express Financial is consumer lending at its very best. They also have a host of dealer service programs with quick approvals. There are 3 ways to apply. Over the phone at 637-9834. You may visit their office in person at 600 Harmon Loop Road across the street from Costules. Or you can also visit their webpage and apply at myexpressfinancial.com. In most cases, you'll get your money the same day.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
A 5th day of searching begins in a few hours in the Southwest Florida Wildlife Reserve, where Brian Laundrie's family says he went for a walk last week and hasn't returned. Crews yesterday added underwater sonar and cadaver dogs to their search. There are some curious numbers in a shareholders lawsuit filed against Facebook last year, but just made public.
In this suit, 2 Rhode Island pension funds, Facebook shareholders, accuse the company of overpaying the FTC, that's the Federal Trade Commission, to stop an inquiry into CEO Mark Zuckerberg. The original fine was $106 million. The payment was $5 billion. What was the extra money for? Well, the suit says this all goes back to the Cambridge Analytica data leak from 2015. Recall that before the 2016 election, political candidates were getting data from Cambridge Analytica, and that data was harvested from millions of people's Facebook accounts without their consent.
Jackie DeAngelis of the Fox Business Network reports the shareholders say the company overpaid the fine to protect owner Mark Zuckerberg from personal liability. Apple will be rewarding its workers for staying on the job during the pandemic and the flurry of economic stimulus checks.
The tech titan is thanking their workers for their efforts during the pandemic and will be handing out as much as $1,000 in one-time bonuses next month to retail staffers hired before March the 31st, while anyone who joined after that date will receive $500. New workers for the holiday shopping season will reportedly get $200. The payouts will also go to Apple Care and online sales workers. Apple doesn't often give bonuses to its retail staff, but the move comes as companies face continued labor shortages and is an attempt by the company to retain its existing employees as Apple heads into the iPhone 13 launch period, as well as the busy holiday shopping season. Hillary Barsky, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Here at Guam Autospot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars, like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
I would love to see a halftime show. I'd love to see a live sports game. Welcome back to Tall Tales. I'm Daryl Taggarty, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie, and we need these reminders of what life used to be, so we can get back to them, however best we can, through a combination of public stewardship, citizenship, personal responsibility, and dealing with nature or man-made, whichever way it is. Are we in the middle of a war? We're just in this biological warfare, and then nobody's actually declared it. But we're welcome back to Tall Tales, and we'll continue today. 888-8255 is your way to get in on the discussion of whatever it might be that is on your mind. I just took a look outside, and all the plants are standing straight up as if there's no wind. The National Weather Service is saying the same thing they've said since 1:45 this afternoon. Tropical storm warning remains in effect for the Marianas. A tropical storm warning continues for Guam, Rota, Tinian, and Saipan. A flood watch is also in effect for all the Marianas. Listen closely for any flood warnings that might be issued for your area. At 1 o'clock this afternoon, Tropical Depression 20W was 75 miles southeast of Guam, and the storm motion was west-northwest at 17 miles per hour with intensity of 35 miles an hour. Well, that would mean that from 1 o'clock to now, the distance should have closed by about half, right? 4 times 17 is 68. It should be like right about here. But if you go outside, it doesn't look like there's any kind of a storm going on. Winds, according to the National Weather Service, winds will increase this afternoon as Tropical Depression 20W strengthens and continues to approach the Marianas. Additional rainfall amounts of 2 to 4 inches could lead to flooding in poor drainage areas. Rip currents could be life-threatening until Friday afternoon. East winds 15 to 20 miles per hour, gusting to 25, will continue to increase over the next several hours. Damaging winds of 35 to 45 miles per hour, gusting to 55 miles per hour, are expected later this afternoon. Winds will gradually shift toward the south through the next 12 to 18 hours. Storm surge of 6 to 8 feet along east and south-facing reefs is possible with this storm. This would result in minor inundation, coastal inundation of 1 to 2 feet. And so that is and the next update will be issued around 9 p.m. or sooner if conditions warrant. A tropical storm warning remains in effect for the Marianas. And so taking a look at that, and it doesn't look like, well, I'll go ahead and take a look and see what it looks like from above. And it looks like the storm has just run over us. Looking at the satellite, that it just crossed right over Molesso, Umatic, about 4 o'clock. And so you should see the wind direction change. I know when I was on my way in, it was amazingly clear. And I don't quite know why, but not clear of clouds, but it wasn't raining and there was no wind. But let's see what happens over the next couple of hours. A tropical storm warning remains in effect for the entire Mariana Island chain. And so, word to the wise. 888-8255 is our number here at Tall Tales. If you're not calling in, it's because you really want me to talk about sex or the Eastman memo. Jose, have you heard about the Eastman memo?
I have not.
Okay, let's see. This is an article that I found in the National Review. For those of you who have been paying attention, National Review has been around for a long time, since William Buckley. So, going back to the 50s, 60s, and was a precursor of Republican thought before Heritage Foundation and Tea Party. So long established. And so it's an article about written by Ramesh Ponnuru. And this just came out today, dated September 22nd. In early January, constitutional scholar John Eastman was urging Vice President Mike Pence to act to keep President Donald Trump in office for a second term, even though the Electoral College had determined weeks earlier that Joe Biden had defeated him. Eastman has now given the public the memo, laying out what Pence was being asked to do and why. You don't know about this? Had you heard about this?
Well, just three words you put together, I already can see a lean. National Review and Trump, because they were very outspoken against Trump.
Are they?
Oh, very much so.
Well, let me see if this article, maybe you might take that and say, well, if National Review is outspoken against Trump, then perhaps this memo is fake, but Eastman himself provided the memo. Okay, and so the article continues. Eastman argued that the Constitution gives the Vice President the authority to determine how to resolve any conflicts when states send dueling slates of electors, and to disregard any statute that says otherwise. Thus, Pence would be on solid ground in throwing out Biden's victories in 7 states, with the result that Trump would be declared the victor. And then the article goes into what would be more of an opinion. There are 2 main objections to Eastman's view. The Constitution gives no such power to the Vice President, and if it did, the states had not sent dueling slates of electors. The 12th Amendment stipulates that the Vice President, in his capacity as the President of the Senate, quote, shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates and the votes shall then be counted, end quote. Eastman quotes that language and then says there is a, quote, very solid legal authority, end quote, that the Vice President gets to judge which electors count. It would have been screwy for the drafters and ratifiers of the 12th Amendment to establish a system in which the Vice President exercises this kind of power, and there is no evidence in the text to suggest that they did. No state government body, meanwhile, certified a Trump victory in any of the 7 states Eastman mentions. Each state officially submitted only 1 set of electors to the National Archives. There were no dueling slates of electors. Some Trump supporters claiming to cast electoral votes for Trump in those states, sure, but they had no official standing under the Constitution, federal law, or state law. And even some of them said they were acting only in case something came of Trump's election lawsuits. Note, though, that Eastman's reading of the Constitution does not actually require there to have been dueling electors. So long as the Vice President's count of the electors gives him the discretion to count whichever ones he wants, he doesn't need anyone else to dispute electors. He doesn't need any nonsense about secret folders in voting machines or any evidence at all. He can just reject the electoral votes he feels like rejecting. Former Vice President Dan Quayle reportedly told Pence that he had, quote, no flexibility on this, end quote. Quote, none, zero, forget it, end quote. That was better advice than Eastman's, better legal analysis, too. This caught my eye because it's interesting that a lawyer would advise a government official to act in such a way. It's okay. I mean, that's what lawyers do. They give advice to people to tell them that they're on firm ground or defensible grounds under the law to behave in one way or another. And that's okay. That's how the system goes. But he wasn't a government lawyer. He's a constitutional scholar. So imagine he'd be willing to go into court and argue it. And that's what lawyers do. I mean, when Bob gets back, you can ask him. That's what lawyers do. They are willing to argue the case, argue their side of the case before a judge to get a ruling, and leave it up to the judge to rule, and then, if necessary, appeal to a higher judge, and so on to the Supreme Court. And so, interesting, if anybody who hasn't seen the memo, you can simply Google John Eastman memo, and it'll come up. And so, and he starts out as saying, 7 states have transmitted dual slates of electors to the President of the Senate. And unlike what this article in National Review says, he said the memo reads 7 states have transmitted dual slates of electors. And so he's already arguing something that may not have been in fact, but he does argue it. Electoral Count Act, and he says it's unconstitutional, then the votes that is shall have been regularly given the electors shown by determination mentioned in Section 5 to have been appointed. So he's saying that the article, the power of the vice president to reject the electors was on solid legal grounds. So it goes down through. It's interesting how it goes through. And if you're interested, then this is something that you might want to read. This John Eastman memo to Mike Pence. But it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, that's what makes this curious. So why even write about it?
It came up in the context of a book investigating, and it didn't really surface until it was mentioned, and then the author of the memo released the memo himself. And so now it's being written about this week. But it was like a week ago that the existence of the memo was first revealed by some
Only
folks.
we can read all the memos given to all candidates.
Well, that is
right?
yeah, and you see, that is what each campaign will do. It will ask for legal opinions from lawyers, and it will ask for financing opinion from people who do finance, and it will ask opinions about how best to approach a community by people who live in the community. That's what campaigns do. And I find it curious that this would come up. It's interesting, merely interesting. And as I mentioned, lawyers are skilled in and prepared to argue a point in court. And
especially for, according to Bob Klitzkie, especially for their client.
Well, that's what they do. They have a client, they argue, they represent the client in a court of law, and they know the law, and they know the procedure of a court. And so they help the client navigate the court in order to hopefully prevail on their interest. And so this is not unexpected, but it is very interesting if you are looking back at what happened in the last year and the election, for this memo to have surfaced at all, and not looking at its like, why was it revealed, but just what kind of argument was being made. So
this is what stuck out at me, because I always look for these funny things.
Yeah.
Former Vice President Dan Quayle reportedly told Pence, better advice than Eastman's, better legal analysis too. It's just too bad he can't spell potato.
Oh. Well, you know, that that's...
It's just funny that would pop up there. And remember, the whole media barrage was how he couldn't spell.
Yes, that's right. I think he was... but he held office before he was... before he became vice president. Vice president. He held office. And he was elected by the people in his state to represent them in policy making. And so we get who we elect. We get the government we deserve. And also not the most desirable people, perhaps, are the ones presenting themselves for public office at any given election. And so you're going to have people who step up and are elected. Oh, what do you know? Let's see. Frenchie, welcome to Tall Tales.
Daryl. Yeah, I was going to call you later, but you brought up the Eastman memo, and so I wanted to give you a little my side of the story on that one. And before that, I would caution you of not singing in the shower in the morning, because look at all the rain we're getting.
Oh, well, I can shower outside. I can shower outside. This is except we're not getting a lot of rain right now.
That could be scary for the children,
Oh, I have a great yard and a big roof, and that water pours down, and I have a private corner where I can go to, and it's just
perfect.
It's wonderful. But thank you.
All right.
For your concern.
So the Eastman memo, now you need to put the context of the Eastman memo and the National Review. The National Review, even though it was created by Buckley Jr., is not what it was, and it's now the one of the hideout for the Never Trumpers. So anything coming from the National Review, you have to put it in that context. The fact that they are quoting Dan Quayle, who is totally compromised by the CCP, since his son married one of the highest-ranking Communist Party member in China, daughter, and he has been extremely quiet because he doesn't want people to talk about that. But the Eastman memo, it's interesting. It's coming up at this time because, as you saw last weekend, Nancy Pelosi wanted to revive the January 6th theory of an attempted coup against democracy by a bunch of white supremacists that wanted to stop the process. Well, in fact, they made it impossible for the process to be stopped legally, like Eastman was arguing with Pence. What we have here, and there are still a lot of questions about January 6th on why there was not enough sufficient security, and then we are slowly finding out that Pelosi refused every request by the Capitol Police to get the National Guards or anybody else like that, even though we knew there were tens of thousands of people coming on the National Mall towards the House. So. And now we're also finding out that all the people that were investigated by the FBI, only 400 to 500 were indicted. Some of them, the charges have already been dropped, and most of the charges come along as breaking an entry or things like that. And there was no weapons found on any of the insurgent, quote unquote, and that about 60 of them, no charges were brought because they were actually either FBI undercover operators or FBI agents. So here again, we have a false flag operation which is brought in to look like there was a coup attempt. And the Bob Woodward book, which came out and made such a scandal regarding General Milley assertions and his calls to China, which are brought forward in the book as a defense of democracy against the evil red-haired man at the White House, is slowly falling apart. And we know that Bob Woodward, since his work in the Watergate scandal, has basically become, ever since, the deep state's scandal revealer. And every time he puts out a book, it's usually need to be looked at as, oh, this is what they want us to believe. And he does a fairly decent job of investigating, but then the way he puts the narrative has become so partisan and so unbelievable that, I haven't bought a Bob Woodward book in years. He used to be an investigative journalist who, like the New York Times now, is living on his old reputation that is no longer what it is. So that was my take on this story. And basically, it's interesting. It's coming out the same time that Bob Woodward's book, and it's kind of bringing up the history of January 6th, basically, and making it believable for the Democrats who are coming empty in their inquiries and they don't have very much. So they need to come up with something right now to keep the narrative going on and distract us for what really is happening with the economy, with the fallout of Afghanistan, and the total FUBAR disaster at the southern border, which continues to go on, even though they're trying to distract us with the so-called whipping of people at the border by the BCP. But we all know it's a distraction rather than a real story.
I thought it was quite sensational to have Marlboro Man appear in a shot that was so perfectly framed and very, very high quality video.
It's very interesting that the mainstream media has refused to cover anything at the border for the last 9 months, and then suddenly they are covering black men being pushed over by BCP officers on horseback. And of course the narrative is, look at those racist white officers whipping out, and I've heard some very inflammatory statements coming from the left wing of the Democratic Party, including Ilhan Omar, who married her brother to let him have a green card, basically tying it up to slavery and the whole CRT theory. So, it's all about narrative versus facts. But the thing I wanted to talk about, which is going to have huge consequences, including for us on Guam, and we already see some of it in a light manner, is the AUKUS, the Australian, UK, United States tripartite new alliance.
And so at this point, let me ask you, Frenchie, if we can take our break at the bottom of the hour, which is normally scheduled, and then we'll come right back and let's talk about AUKUS. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
Very good. Thank you very much for calling, Frenchie. Let's go to that break, Jose, and then we'll be right back.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Your seventh inning stretch. Let's get right back to our caller Frenchie, who's going to talk with us a bit about AUKUS, the tripartite new alliance. Thank you very much, Frenchie, for staying on the line. Oh, there you are. There you are. Okay.
Yeah, you had lost me, but I called back. So anyhow, AUKUS is interesting because it's a tripartite agreement between Australia, UK, and the US, which already has had a catastrophic side effect. And it comes on the heels of the US catastrophic exit from Afghanistan. And so the Biden administration needed something strong to communicate that the U.S. was still in the picture, and they decided to proclaim the AUKUS, which has been in the work for several months, according to people that are watching those things. And basically, it is a reinforcement of the already existing alliance with Japan, India in the Indo-Pacific area, and trying to bring in other countries to join them in trying to contain the Communist Chinese Party, especially in the South China Sea, but also in the North China Sea. And what is happening is that part of the deal, the Australians renege on a contract that they have with Naval Group, which is a French naval military naval company, where they were supposed to build 12 submarines for the Australians.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, they will get U.S. nuclear submarine. Now, the reason they were going with France after a long bidding war with Germany, Sweden, and Japan was that the previous Australian government wanted new submarines to replace their very aging ones, and they didn't want to break the proliferation treaty which Australia signed, which basically engaged people not to transfer nuclear technology to another member who is not a nuclear power. And so by doing so, the Biden administration is breaking the treaty of nuclear non-proliferation by giving the technology to the Australian, which means that they will have much more aggressive and not defensive submarines, and that has sent the neighbors, the friendly neighbors like Indonesia and New Zealand, apoplectic because they are members of that non-proliferation treaty, and New Zealand already declared they would not allow those ships to come through their waters, and Indonesia has declared the same thing. And then, of course, as could be expected, the Chinese Communist Party, through their mouthpiece, came out with extremely violent rhetoric against the U.S. and basically criticizing the breaching of the non-nuclear agreement, with which they are also part a signatory to. So, in the background of that, after the catastrophic escape from Afghanistan, most NATO countries in Europe were quite upset with the U.S. because the U.S. went ahead and left without warning anybody, and everybody had to go and rush and try to get their people out, and the people that had worked with them for decades out. And it was a terrible situation, and the NATO members were not happy at all, which has been totally downplayed here in the U.S. But I tell you, from the Germans to even the most pro-American countries like Denmark and Holland, people were extremely pissed. And what has happened by that cancellation of the contract for the submarine with France is that France has become also apoplectic. They are saying, we thought Biden would be different than Trump, but he's more violent than Trump. And they recall their ambassador, which had never been done by France, even at the worst times of relationships with France and the United States. So they recall their ambassadors to the U.S. and to Australia. Biden called Macron today. Now, Macron is very pro-United States, so I doubt he will go any further. But the talk in Europe and the main concern at NATO is that France will pull out of NATO. And this would be the tipping point of for NATO, because France is, after Turkey, the largest military contributor to NATO and the only one of the Western country that is capable of projecting forces overseas. And of course, Britain to a lesser extent. But Britain is going to rebuild their defense now that they have had the Brexit. So we have a situation now where you have one NATO member, namely Turkey, who has been aiding and abetting the Taliban. You have two key U.S. allies, Pakistan and Qatar, who are openly cooperating with the Taliban in Afghanistan, with Qatar now having 100% control of the Kabul International Airport and all flights coming in and out of Afghanistan, which means like countries like Kandahar, Mazar al-Sharif in the northeast no longer have international flights. So everything goes through Kabul. And the people, the Taliban already changed government twice. And so the French were already pissed with this. Now it's going to come out. And there are calls from as far left in France of the Communist Party and as far right of the National Front to get out of NATO, to show that France is very upset, and it could have catastrophic consequences for the whole Northern Atlantic Alliance. This was done the AUKUS declaration was done in a hurry to kind of make us forget about the Afghanistan exit, and actually it made it worse. So we here on Guam, at the tip of the spear, as you have noticed, that the Queen Elizabeth is visiting us right now, and
the second visit.
Yeah, the second visit in a very short time, and her escort ships, of course, which is because a naval group that goes by themselves, they have submarines to protect them, frigates, and so on, and electronic warfare ships. The Queen Elizabeth is supposed to stay in the Pacific for quite an extensive time. So there are chances that we will see an increase of visits of Australian and British ships, while France is getting even more upset with Australia because of a thing that also touches us here on Guam, which is New Caledonia. New Caledonia in December will have their third and last referendum on independence. The first two votes were rejected, and the third vote, there is a lot of shenanigans going on now with white and Asian voters not being able to register, while the Kanaks, who are the original population, even though they are a minority in New Caledonia, is registering like crazy. And so there is a chance that on top of the submarine, on top of the submarine scandal, we might have a rift with Australia because the Australians for the last 30 years have backed up the pro-independence movement in New Caledonia. And instead of having Australians mine consortium winning anything after an independence of New Caledonia, it could be the Chinese who could benefit from the mines of nickel that New Caledonia is well known for, and also the excellent deep port for their naval opportunities. And it would be a catastrophe for Australia to have right north of their shore a main Chinese naval port where the French used to be. So there are a lot of consequences. And if you look at Robert Underwood and at Dr. quote-unquote Bevacqua, they always use New Caledonia as an example of what could happen here on Guam, which would be a UN-sponsored referendum, not once, not twice, but 3 times, to request for independence of Guam. So as you see, nothing happens in a vacuum, and everything seems to converge in very difficult time in the Pacific Ocean coming up. France is talking about remilitarizing French Polynesia and deploying nuclear submarine there, and maybe a second aircraft carrier. So this is not good. If you like peace and if you don't want things to get worse, it is not good. And it is, again, a demonstration of the so-called adults in the rooms that were supposed to be the Biden administration, messing up one thing after the other, after the other, after the other, and making it worse than anything we've seen since the Wilson administration.
That's a mouthful there, Frenchie. And I appreciate your perspective. I'm not in a position to challenge any of it, and even if I was, it's not really. These are all things for us to keep an eye on. But you know, the British battle group that's been assigned to this part of the world, and I guess Guam being the only real port where they can be supported, because they can't land in Taiwan, they can't land in Hong Kong, they can't land in, I guess they could land someplace in Thailand, or they could go to Singapore.
They no longer can land in Taiwan, and of course, thanks to Jimmy Carter, there is no more naval base in the Philippines, which was a huge victory for the communists at the time, and that goes back to Jimmy Carter. And who, by the way, was the last president until Trump not to start a war in the United States. So it's interesting that Biden looks very likely that he might put us in a very difficult situation conflict-wise, where we would not be at an advantage for the first time since World War II. So it is extremely difficult, extremely sensitive, and we will spend a few months and years, if nothing happens, looking over our shoulder very carefully, because of course, while nobody was talking about it, Kim Jong-un has restarted his nuclear program. And the only other bases where the British can land, but the government is not very happy with it, and they basically notify the British they would rather not, unless it's an emergency, is Japan.
That's right. And that's been really those have been consistent positions. So Guam is now available for not only the forward deployment of British naval power, but also the extended deployment of Singapore Air Force power and Australian under the ANZUS, right? Because isn't New Zealand and Australia and the United States They also have a security pact, and so they exercise together.
And the Indian Navy as well.
And the Indian Navy. But the Indian Navy visited Guam, and
Yeah,
the United States...
They did last year.
And the United States has declared an exercise area that extends from the far northern Marianas out to Palau, and includes an observation, basically an anchor observation point at Palau, and then down includes Yap State and Palau waters, as well as the Marianas on both sides of the Marianas, and those are exclusion zones.
Yeah, and China has made unsecure loan to Pohnpei.
Well,
so there is a lot of things going on.
They have been going on, though, and I'm wondering about your assertion that that this is different than before, because it's my understanding that it's simply that these moves are coming to the surface, but they have been for a long time being discussed. The forward basing of U.S. Planes and ships in the north of Australia, but Australia had not opened up any bases, but they've been discussing this for probably 15 or 20 years. And
that is correct, but it's accelerating right now, and it's accelerating at a time where we have incapable leaders at the Pentagon, and we have a president which at best has ice cream moments. And so the question for us is to know who's pulling the strings at the White House behind the curtain, and why did we put these incapable people at the Pentagon who should have all resigned after Afghanistan and are still there pushing for CRT, instead of making sure that the operations we're putting out are done properly, which is not the case in Afghanistan, and definitely not, and that the people that have signed in to put their life in the way to serve the United States are actually being taken care of, which is also a huge concern looking at the budget and the lack of funding for the Veterans Administration. So there are a lot of very disturbing things happening. It's not new, as you say, but we are observing a worsening trend and an acceleration of armament in East Asia. The Koreans, the Indonesians, the Vietnamese, even the Philippines, and of course we're going to have a new president in the Philippines very soon. So there are a lot of things for us to watch out, and we are kind of stuck in the middle of all this, and so we should try to at least be aware of what's happening, and continue to watch what will happen. And and so the plan that the Biden administration had, which was to ask NATO countries to send rotations of ships in the Pacific, and the Dutch had agreed to it, the French had agreed to it, but I understand that they canceled that plan. The Spanish, the Italians, the Danes, the Swedes, who all have fairly advanced electronic warfare ships. And right now, NATO is at risk of totally disintegrating. So there are consequences to what just happened last week. And right now, unless they work very hard to save, not only save space, but also save the process in place, we are facing some rough time ahead of us.
Well, thank you very much, Frenchie. And I know that you'll be keeping an eye on it, and I'd like for you to call back again, and we'll talk about this some more. Okay?
Yeah, and we can talk maybe later. We can also talk of what really happened in Afghanistan. And I was talking with some former colleagues in the French services that are retiring now, but have still a lot of good sources. And it's very interesting to see who the actors were at the end, who backstabbed the U.S. in the back, and so on. So very interesting.
So
right.
let's talk again on this, and thank you again for your call this afternoon, Frenchie. It's time for us to take.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's time for us to take a break here, and we'll be right back with another caller. Another Joe is on the line. So take it away.
You know all those amazing photos and videos saved on your camera roll capturing your love for Guam? We want to see it. Log on to visitguam.com/Instaguam to submit your best moments for a chance to win weekly prizes. The Guam Visitors Bureau will choose a weekly winner, so share your love for our island paradise now and win. Brought to you by GVB. Thank you for making Guam a better place to live, work, and visit.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Well, on this not stormy Thursday afternoon, just taking a look at the weather here. Outside, the winds are picking up. They're up to 9 miles an hour after the last couple of hours of them being around 3 miles an hour. And not just here on Guam, but also up in Saipan. 5 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour, calm at 4 o'clock. So, you know. Oh. More stuff coming in. Let's go ahead and take a listen to another Joe. Thank you very much, another Joe, for calling in this afternoon and making my day.
So you must be Clint Eastwood.
Well,
I hope I'm not the punk.
You're not. No, you're not at the other end of my 44. So, how you doing?
Thank God. So thanks. Next thing you, Daryl.
Thank you.
So I have to say I agree with a lot of the points that Frenchie made, but you know, here I don't know. Only the tall audience here in Guam would be interested in these points. I think most people in Guam, you know, I don't know. Right now we're concerned about the local issues as most Americans are in their localities. I've got to say before I forget, a lot of this would have been avoided, Mr. Taggarty, if they had just automatically started. Well, no, maybe I don't think it would be possible because it's partisan. But if they had enough Democrats that'd be willing to, at some point in time, start an impeachment process, this is the only way to get the attention of this administration. Say, hey, we still got some checks and balances here, and you're kind of going off the deep end there, buddy. And at the time, you don't seem to know where you're at.
But does it take impeachment? Doesn't it just take the regular work of the politicians that we've elected and put in power to make to determine what the policies are? You see, it doesn't take anything extreme. It just takes people doing their jobs. That's how the system is set up. You know?
Yeah, I know. I agree. Normally, I agree with you, Mr. Taggarty. It seems to work with like Bill Clinton. There's certain personas, so to speak, that just seem to need special attention. You know, for some reason, and it just seems as though this guy in the White House now seems to have that sort of persona where he needs a little bit of special attention. He needs people to put him a little bit in check. You know, when he's not following the science and the data, and a lot of people are saying, hey, you know, you're kind of getting ahead of yourself, man. But before I didn't want to focus too much on just that because, you know,
I thought you were talking about Lou. I thought you were talking about Lou.
No, I'm talking about the White House.
Okay, but you and Frenchie, I'm getting the impression that you guys are really, really secretly hoping to have a President Kamala Harris. I just can't get over this. People really want get Biden out of the way so we can have a woman president, and people are gonna not just people who are dissatisfied with the vote last year, but a wide spectrum of people across the country are going to come to a consensus, and they're all going to say Kamala Harris for president 2022. And make it happen.
I want to go that far. I think what I would say is because there's an unwillingness in the political, climate to start impeachment process right now for Biden, then we need to trust the system. But that's the mindset. I'm saying fancy the mindset. And so if we trust the system, right? If they did finally say, hey, yeah, even if it takes the midterm and a Republican majority in the House and the Senate, they finally do start an impeachment. The issue is to trust the system, even if she becomes president, which I don't really like the idea because she seems to be more socialistic than Biden. I could be wrong, but it just seems that way. And she really just piggybacked with him. She's kind of like, I don't know if it's appropriate. She's kind of like Dan Quayle, and didn't really much have credibility, but they're there. And even just recently, Quayle had given some so-called bad advice to.
So you think that she has? That Hillary Clinton had more substance than Kamala Harris?
Hillary's scary, but obviously she's not a pushover. And this Kamala, I don't know if she's a pushover and then would she go to the extreme to prove that she isn't? She's an unknown, I guess you would say.
Well, let's go ahead and pick up on that another day. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock with Tall Tales.
Okay, hey, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, another Joe. As we wind up to 6 o'clock and venture out into the weather, everybody stay dry, and we'll be back again tomorrow with more Tall Tales.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
DHS acknowledges migrants are being let in. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Department of Homeland Security has admitted that contrary to its director's public statements, they are releasing some of the Haitian refugees at Del Rio, Texas, into the U.S.
My Border Patrol sources on the ground working here in Del Rio tell me what they're doing is basically releasing any family units and any women who are currently claiming to be pregnant. And you can see the impact that it's having on the camp here. Parts of it are finally starting to be cleared out because the feds want to get the optics of this gone, so they're trying to clear it as fast as possible.
Fox's Bill Malusian at the border for a second straight day yesterday. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas told a congressional hearing he didn't have the numbers on how many people have been let in or how many have been sent back to their home countries. The Food and Drug Administration has approved Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine booster shots for some.
For people over 65, younger adults with health conditions, and for people with jobs that may put them at higher risk for the disease. The Biden administration had been hoping for booster shots for all adults, and there are still regulatory hills to climb before any of those third shots go out. Advisors for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are debating, and some of them aren't convinced yet that boosters are needed.
Fox's Jill Nato. President Biden announcing the U.S. has purchased 500 million doses of coronavirus vaccines for distribution to poorer countries.
The United States is also announcing that we're providing an additional $370 million to support administering these shots.
President speaking during a virtual vaccine summit with members of the United Nations General Assembly yesterday. Wall Street back in the black Wednesday. The Dow gained 338 points. NASDAQ added 150. Asian stock markets closing Thursday mixed. Dow futures are up nearly 200 points. America is listening to Fox News.
from the Fox News Podcasts Network.
Hey, this is Trey Gowdy, host of the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Every Tuesday, you'll hear what's on my mind. Plus, every Thursday, there's a special bonus episode where we answer the questions that are on your mind. Make sure to spend your Tuesdays and Thursdays with Trey. Subscribe now at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. Hope to see you.
America's listening to Fox News. From the Fox News Podcasts Network, the Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't